Hi, I'm Nathan Fox. I'm an illustrator, a comic book artist, and the chair of the MFA Visual Narrative Program at the School of Visual Arts here in New York City. I'm co-creator and artist on The Weatherman, currently out right now. And today I'll be working on a couple of character shots and sketching and inking. So I'm working on the two main characters. We've got Nathan Bright and Agent Amanda Cross. Their names are definitely perfect for their personalities. And at least story-wise and comic book-wise, it's really amazing to work on characters once you kind of figure out who they are. At least when we got started on the comic book and I started working with Jody on the series, we knew that we wanted time to really develop the characters and their voices as much as we could. Probably before we even really got started on story stuff, because everything really, at least in the Weatherman, everything really is bound and is housed around these two crazy kids and their relationship. So once we got started on development of the book, we knew we had something once we figured out not only their visual development and what we wanted the characters to look like, but their relationship and how they actually work together. And Jody and I have been working on this book for over 2 years before we really got cooking on everything, as well as before the book even started coming out. It would allow us the greatest amount of time to really figure out who they were and how we wanted the story to develop, but even beyond that, really making something that we were excited about and we knew that readers would get immersed in once their personalities and the story really started taking off. So The Weatherman is a far future sci-fi full meal comic epic that we're going to be telling in 3 arcs over 3 years, 6 issues each arc. And The Weatherman is basically a far future sci-fi story on terraform Mars, where 99% of mankind on Earth has been completely obliterated. There's this huge devastating event, and everybody's reeling from that loss on both Mars and Earth and elsewhere. So being the sci-fi epic that it is, those who are left on Mars are reeling from all of that and really want justice and really in fear of a second attack. And I was fortunate enough to go to school with Jim Mahfood and Mike Huddleston, which was an amazing education in comics as well as illustration and image making. And their bookshelves were easily my education into an introduction into mainstream as well as alternative comics in undergrad. I didn't grow up necessarily with comics or mainstream comics. I mean, I was aware of some amazing cartoons and Super Friends and all that stuff to date myself, and definitely Hanna-Barbera. What I found and learned on those bookshelves really started to make sense with everything that they were doing, and my foray and interest into not only printmaking and comics and film, but the language of story. Jim, back in the day, and Mike were an amazing comic duo when they were starting out getting work. And Jim's an amazing inker. And I don't remember who told him this, but he passed the advice along to me that in terms of mark making and inking, whether using a pencil, a brush, or a pen or Pentel or Copic or whatever, if you can control chaos With a brush, you could probably translate that into whatever other medium you're using because you'd have intent and focus. So I guess when I approach a composition or approach a drawing, it's usually with a very specific story or emotion or empathy in mind, and really trying to get across a very specific narrative in the construction. So a lot of the way that I approach this stuff is really what is the content and how do I really want the viewer and the characters to have that conversation. And I'm definitely a firm believer that nothing is precious. So even though I do have like a sketch kind of started, I'm never really bound to what I initially do. I kind of want it to kind of breathe and grow as I do it. I've certainly learned more from experimenting and making accidents and kind of failing than I have from believing that I knew what I was doing or knowing exactly what I want every time. And I always love the fact that illustrating and doing comics, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is really about lying and putting a bunch of marks together in order to communicate and visually collect a language and communication of marks that are going to tell us that something is something. That was the thing I loved when I was a kid. I was never really into comics or took art seriously, but I had PBS. So for anybody out there, Commander Mark and Bob Ross were two of my favorite PBS shows. And I was always kind of amazed that you can literally make something out of nothing, and it's completely false. Found this amazing Big Daddy Roth and Von Dutch video where Big Daddy Roth was interviewing Von Dutch about his sign painting and pinstriping. So being in hot rods himself and custom cars and all that. And I was starting to get interested in tattoos and pinstriping and mark making and different brushes. And it was amazing to see Von Dutch kind of do his thing with this blade. And he was making type forms and some really amazing designs with a knife brush. And it kind of blew me away. And one thing he was doing was in there he kept talking about priming the brush, and Big Daddy Roth asked him what he was, could he show what he was talking about? So he did it in slow motion for the camera, and so I have this other pad that I always use next to me where I can kind of prime the brush. And even though it looks like I'm just making like a mark down, I'm actually curling and spinning it at the same time. Because in the video, when Von Dutch primed it, he would dip it into the enamel paint, and then he would pull and flop, and literally do it so fast you couldn't see what was happening. But he knew from the feel and texture of the paint in the brush, like it was perfect and ready to go, and he would do that every time before he would make marks. When we were starting to design the characters, I think for some reason, Cross made sense immediately. And I think we might have gone through maybe just one design and round of edits with her, but Nathan definitely took a while to figure out. Because he's that guy. He's that guy that everything's awesome and the world is perfect. There's only so many references for personalities like that. So it really took a while to figure out who he was and what he looked like. Well, I think there's definitely to some degree a rather heavy inspiration on our end for the book in terms of what our interests are and what we like to watch. So I don't think there's any way around it. Most definitely. But things like obviously Akira and Sword of the Stranger. Cowboy Bebop and Space Dandy are definitely both influences of ours. So over the years, I've just started figuring out what brushes and inks work best. and just kind of experimenting and playing around. I used to, and still do, kind of make my own tools from time to time, I guess, to mess around with ink. Of course, I didn't bring any with me today, but it's kind of amazing what you can create playing around with just brush strokes and drawing with X-Acto blades and making your own brushes and using sticks. But like a dry brush and kind of fanning these Chinese brushes out or make some really amazing results. I'm Nathan Fox, and this is Nathan Bright and Amanda Cross from the Weatherman.